From MTN, the Montana Television Network, this is Face the State.
Good morning and welcome to Face the State. Believe it or not, it's been 3 weeks since Montana voted in a special election to replace Congressman Ryan Zinke. To discuss the fallout from that election and the political landscape moving into the 2018 and 2020 cycles, Mike Dennison and I are joined by two veterans of Montana politics. First, Tim Warner, a political consultant who's worked on a number of statewide races and a former staffer for Senator Baucus. And second, Aaron Flint, who's worked for Senator Conrad Burns as a statewide radio host, and most recently as Greg Gianforte's communications director during his gubernatorial bid. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
Great to be here with you guys.
We have a lot to catch up on. I was out of the country during this special election. What the heck happened? Mike, you've been reporting on the events. Election night, Greg Gianforte beats Rob Quist, and fairly handedly at the end of the day.
Yeah, he did. And of course, let's talk about the night before. We had the incident when he attacked a reporter from The Guardian, and everyone's running around saying, "Oh my God, what's this going to do to the race?" And people forgot probably that 3/4 of the people had already voted. I don't think it did a lot to the race. It might have made it a little bit closer, but Gianforte won with about 50.2% of the vote. I wouldn't say it was an easy victory. He spent a lot of money. Republicans nationally spent a lot of money to defeat Rob Quist. It was the most expensive House race in Montana history, but the result, still the same thing. Republicans control the seat as they have for, 22 years? And Gianforte is now looking ahead to probably another hard-fought election next time.
Was this a surprise, gentlemen? Did you expect that Greg Gianforte was going to win this race at the beginning of the whole show?
Well, my perspective is that he was the only kind of statewide Republican person with a brand who had proven that he could lose statewide as a Republican when he ran against Steve Bullock. So it's kind of, I think there was some hope among Democrats that they had a chance at winning this. Rob Quist raised $6 million. That's 4.2 or 3 million more than any other Democratic candidate has ever raised on this race. So was there hope on the Democratic side among certain people? Sure. But I think when millions of dollars of independent expenditures from political PACs from out of state came waving into Montana, a lot of hope was lost, especially when the DCCC decided to just take a walk on the race and not get involved.
Aaron, surprised or not?
Yeah, David, I don't think it was a surprise that Greg Gianforte won this special election, and I think for context we have to look back at 2016. In fact, you said at the start of the governor's race, look, 50 of the 53 past incumbent governors had won re-election at that point. But what I found interesting, if you look back at 2016, the Democrats threw everything they had at Greg Gianforte and lost everything else in the process. And yet, what did they have to show for it after the November elections? A governor in Steve Bullock, who immediately started to send the heroes of the highways, our Montana Highway Patrol troopers, wanted to send them home packing and without jobs. He wanted to fire a bunch of Highway Patrol troopers. But I think even some Democratic operatives have conceded the fact that Greg Gianforte went into this special election with statewide name recognition and momentum. He put in the work going into all 56 counties over the past 2 years. And so I think Greg Gianforte had the momentum from the start. He really carried that momentum from the 2016 races, and it proved to be unstoppable at the end of the day. But plus, also, he had a message. I think this clearly sent a message. There were some on the left that I think, and as Tim pointed out, Rob Quist was able to raise a lot of money from national progressive causes because they thought this is a way for us to send a message that Donald Trump is unpopular.
More than a million was from
Donald
Montanans,
Trump.
too.
Donald Trump is still very clearly popular in Montana. Donald Trump Jr. came to the state. Vice President Mike Pence came to the state. And so I think this is a clear message. And actually, it sends a very clear warning shot to Senator Jon Tester in 2018 as well, who's never carried a majority. Jon Tester has never really won a strong victory. And so I think Democrats are not only saddened by the loss in the 2017 special election, but they're very concerned about what this means for Democrats in 2018, because I think Republicans are on the way, if they do things right, to making Montana a red state and getting us out of this purple mud that we've kind of been stuck in.
You know, looking from afar, you know, I wasn't here for all the back and forth with the TV ads and everything like that. The thing that struck me is the amount of money. Now, you said, Mike, most expensive House race in
by
Montana
far.
history, by far.
Twice as much, yeah.
Much of the money was from outside sources, right? I mean, I tallied up something like $6, $7, $8 million outside, and the bulk of it was Republicans tearing down Rob Quist. Did Rob Quist ever have a chance with this amount of money coming into the state? I mean, what are the flaws here? Was this a Gianforte win or is this a Quist loss? What do you think, Mike?
Well, I think a little bit of both. I mean, to start with, like I said, Republicans have controlled this seat for 22 years, so I think they're the odds-on favorite to win it going in. And Rob Quist, yes, he had a lot of money and he got a lot of it toward the end, but I think fundamentally he was not that strong of a candidate. He'd never run before. He made some rookie mistakes early, you know, talking about gun control, things like that. And when we would question him about issues, I felt like he didn't really have a strong grasp of the issues. Whereas when you would talk to Mr. Gianforte, he just seemed to me to be a much more confident, better informed, seasoned candidate.
The money advantage was overwhelmingly for Greg Gianforte than the Republicans, and yet you could look at this in one way. It took all that money, and yet still Greg Gianforte cracks about 50%. So at one level, that suggests weakness. And another way, Rob Quist did get 4 points better than Denise Juneau, than Amanda Curtis, so he was a stronger Democratic candidate. So there's a little bit of glass half empty, glass half full, no matter how you look at it. Should Quist have done anything differently, Tim?
Well, I don't really like to look back and say, yep. I mean, Rob Quist might have done some things differently. I think the Democratic Party probably should have done some things differently in terms of vetting a candidate and evaluating who the candidate should be, and looking at the politics of Montana and the types of policy positions that are a little bit more in the middle and not on extremes. And I think most of the candidates, but for maybe John Lewis, that the Democratic Party has put up more recently have been what I would consider more fringe candidates. And I think that's worth considering. You take a Jon Tester, who at his core is a businessman, a farmer, teacher, and just all around very good person. You know, that's the type of candidate that I think are going to be strong Democratic candidates in the future.
I have a question for Aaron about Mr. Gianforte. Of course, you worked with him, and a lot of Republicans think he's a very strong candidate, and now he's going to be a congressman. How is he going to recover from this incident before the election? You know, he's pleaded guilty to misdemeanor assault. You know his opponents are going to be hanging that around his neck every chance they get. How do you think he can recover from that and get past that?
Well, I think, look, no matter who you are as a newly elected member of Congress, obviously you've got your work cut out for you. That incident aside, I think any newly elected member of Congress is going to have to prove themselves to Montanans that you can also go beyond ideology and focus on, like Dr. Parker said, the constituent services and taking care of Montana constituents regardless of party votes back in D.C. or ideology. But I also think, with regard to that particular incident, I don't think you're going to find a lot of people in political circles defending what happened. Certainly we're not seeing Greg himself even defend that. He's apologized. I think most Montanans have accepted that apology. And now the work is really going to come down to getting out there and doing the job that's in front of him as the newly elected member. Montanans spoke, they voted for him, and now he's got to do the work. And I think anybody who's followed Greg Gianforte in the last couple of years is confident that he's going to get that he's going to get out there and get his shoes dirty and traveling all across Montana and getting the job done. Going back to, though, I'd partly also agree with what Tim Warner had to say here, in the sense that he's right that Democrats really have some soul searching to do. I think. They've really only had a 13-county strategy of late, it seems, and a lot of their candidates really have been more to the fringe. It's been more about Bernie Sanders and Nancy Pelosi against Donald Trump and the Republicans, and that's a losing narrative every single time here in Montana. And where is their bench? In fact, they had some strong people on their bench, and they've kicked those people to the curb, the Angela McLeans of the world, strong people that were on their bench that have been kicked to the curb by the Montana Democratic Party. And so But Jon Tester is one of those fringe candidates. Now, maybe 10 years ago he ran
Jon
as
Tester's a fringe candidate,
maybe 10
Two-time
years ago.
US Senator?
I mean,
Well, I think. Let me finish my point here.
Okay.
He has been more focused on helping national Democrats like Chuck Schumer and the radical leftists in his party raise money than he has been about taking care of Montana. Now, Tim, you worked for Max Baucus. It used to be in the state that Democrats and Republicans could work together to get things done for Montana. And it paid Montana to have a voice in both parties. But that's not happening today because Jon Tester is not siding with Montanans. He's earned the moniker Tehran Jon Tester for his support of the nuclear deal with Iran. He's not taking care of Montana. Now, it used to be we used to have the earmarks in the appropriations process so both senators could team up and really work both parties to help Montana. But we're not seeing that. Instead, we're seeing one party that's keeping Montana stuck in the purple mud, and then the other party that's standing up for Colstrip, standing up for farmers and ranchers against the EPA. And Jon Tester hasn't been in that fight. He's been MIA, raising money for Chuck Schumer
Filibuster
and the radical
over.
leftists.
Filibuster over, and the talking points are done. Jon Tester
I've got no notes
is
in
a
my pockets
hardworking
here.
man and does a great, great job.
What's
for
he
the state of
accomplished?
Montana.
What's he accomplished?
Significant accomplishments. And one of the problems that I
Like?
think the Republican Party has is Senator Daines and newly elected, soon-to-be Congressman Gianforte have gone all in for Donald Trump. That means shutting down our hospitals, jeopardizing our public schools, and not helping build our infrastructure, and in fact, tearing it down. So
Well, the only
there are a lot of
infrastructure failures we've
consequences.
seen is Steve Bullock vetoing infrastructure, and 6 years later, here we are without infrastructure. But again, I'll ask you the question: what has Jon Tester accomplished?
Well, he just passed a bill to help veterans. It
Max
was approved by the
but-
Senate and the House.
But if
Veterans,
you talk with veterans,
healthcare,
he's done nothing but pay lip
public
service for the
education.
last decade on these issues. And in fact, every VA director that he's got installed in Fort Harrison has only made the problems worse, and we've gone through multiple resignations. So again, what has he done? I know Mike helped you out a little bit there, but Tim, what has Jon Tester done for the state of Montana? Max Baucus, you could say you might have disagreed with him
Are
on
you done?
Obamacare,
Just-
but what has he done?
Okay, filibuster over. He's worked very hard for public education. He's worked very hard for health care and access to health care for people that aren't wealthy and people who are normal, average Montanans. He's worked hard for small businesses and helping to inspire SBR, IR loans and other things that help create jobs. And he's fought for Montana ranchers and farmers. And he's working against the effort of the Trump administration to cut and gut agriculture programs and programs that help and support our small businesses.
We'll get back to Tester in a minute, but let's go
Okay.
back to one thing that Aaron said and that you talked a little bit about too, and that is a Democratic bench. In 2018, someone's going to run against Greg Gianforte, or maybe several people are going to try to run against Greg Gianforte. Who do the Democrats have as far as a bench and as far as the potential candidates out there to tackle this race, one they haven't won in 2 decades?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm not advocating for any of these people,
Sure.
but I think you can see Jesse Lazovich, possibly being a person of interest there. Tom Woods, a representative from here in Bozeman. I do think that Rob Quist shouldn't be counted out yet. And I think we'll also see a person that's the only filed House candidate so far is Kelly McCarthy out of Billings. It's my understanding that dozens of women and men have been in contact with leaders in the Democratic Party and have expressed interest to win. I think a lot of people believe that Greg Gianforte may have body slammed a reporter, but he may have given a pile driver to his career. The greatest risk, I think, that Gianforte has, and even Steve Daines has, is going all in for Trump and not knowing what the consequences are going to be. And I think that's inspired a lot more bench than might have been there for the Democrats.
So Mike and David and the folks watching back at home all across Montana, the question I was asking for Tim was, well, so what has Jon Tester accomplished? And we didn't hear any specifics in there. The appropriate question back to me, and the question that I anticipated in response, because he's bashing President Trump, who's still very popular here in Montana.
I didn't bash
But a
President
good
Trump.
question back to me would have been, well, where's the beef? Where's the beef with the Trump administration? What have they accomplished? Now, granted, they haven't been in Washington for over a decade like Jon Tester has been so far, but look at what we've already got. Montana's #1 industry is agriculture. And what have we gotten news of here of late? In fact, Ag Secretary Sonny Perdue, Senator Steve Daines just brought the Ag Secretary here to Montana. What is
And what
Donald
did he
Trump?
hear? He heard that, no, we don't want our ag programs cut. We
What-
want our small businesses to be robust.
What did they
We
hear?
want the rural economy to be kept
China,
strong.
You used to work for Senator Max Bucket, so you would understand the importance of this more than anybody, the importance of opening up the Chinese market to American beef, to Montana beef. Well, thanks to Donald Trump, we're already seeing his leadership in America once again being recognized for our leadership on the national scale. And now, correct me if I'm wrong, but American beef is going to be open in China again. That is an incredible accomplishment by the Trump administration, and one of the best pieces of economic news that the state of Montana and our #1 industry, agriculture, could have received. Not to mention coal. Why won't Jon Tester stand up for coal strip? Why won't he support some of the efforts by the Trump administration and our new, and you know, Montanans are proud of our new Secretary of the Interior, Ryan Zinke, lifting the coal moratoriums that were put in place under the Obama administration. I mean, Jon Tester is more interested in raising money for the radical left and Chuck Schumer in New York than he is in taking care of Montana. And I wish there were some of the Democrats from the old days were still around.
They will see far beyond your talking points and far beyond your partisan rhetoric. Jon Tester has busied himself with the business of the people of Montana, and he has done an excellent job and will continue to do an excellent job. The efforts to kick people off of Medicaid, the efforts to kick people off their health care, the efforts to cut agriculture and ranching in Montana, there are probably going to be some political consequences to that.
Well, there's been political consequences for the Democrats in Montana ever since Jon Tester helped cast a vote in support of Obamacare. And the people who wanted to keep their doctors weren't able to keep their doctors. And Democrats have been losing ever since as a result of that.
Does the Republican Party of Montana think it's a good idea for people to be kicked off their health care insurance?
I don't speak for the Republican Party of
Is it
Montana.
a yes or a no?
But
is it a yes or a no?
They don't, and that's exactly why they opposed Obamacare. Because Obamacare was kicking people off of their health insurance.
You know, let's, I'm sorry, go
In
ahead.
2012, Republicans nationally and here in the state tried to tie Jon Tester to the Democratic Party nationally into Obamacare, and it didn't work. I'm not too sure it's going to work in 2018. We have a midterm election when historically the president's party gets punished throughout the country, even if he's, quote, more popular here. Typically what happens is the president's party gets pummeled in Congress. Now, I'm going to go to a point to Jon Tester and to ask Aaron this question. You mentioned the Democratic bench that has not been in operation. Well, who the heck is the Republican bench to take on Jon Tester? Your best person probably was Tim Fox. And, well, he said no. There's got to be a reason for that. And I suspect it has the fact that maybe Jon Tester's a little bit stronger politically than you give him credit for.
Well, or the fact that Tim Fox, unlike our current governor, actually has things that he's working to accomplish for the people of Montana and Helena. Tim Fox has a very aggressive agenda where he's working to crack down on drug abuse and on domestic and sexual violence. He's actually been working on an agenda. In fact, I think he's got a legislative record from the Attorney General's office of 39-0, but we might have to double check those numbers. He's got an incredible record. He's actually trying to do something in Helena for Montanans. We're not seeing that out of the Democrats in the governor's office. And once again, they lost everything last year, and they put all their money to save Steve Bullock in the governor's office, and yet they have no flagpole to rally around because they haven't delivered on infrastructure funding. They tried to fire a bunch of highway patrol troopers, and what do they have? But you did make a good point, which is, look, the Republicans in the past, and I don't speak on behalf of the Republican Party or any of these candidates, but it's always been a national election. And David, I agree with you. You need to localize these elections. And that's where I actually think Jon Tester's weakness, despite the Tehran Jon Tester monikers he's been given,
By whom?
I believe
By
that
him.
was, that
By
was
you.
They
well,
just
actually-
made it up and
yeah.
he says it and he thinks
I
it's
would love
true.
to take credit for that, but actually I believe Paul Musthaven in Billings was the one who gets the credit for that.
Okay.
Otherwise, I would love to take the credit for that. But it's not that, it's not even the devastating impacts of Obamacare that we've seen here in Montana. It goes back to that discussion that I was having with Tim, which is, look, Montanans in the past have been okay with being a purple state, having a Democratic senator, having a Republican senator. Yeah, they have some competitiveness there, but at the end of the day, they get the job done for Montana. We're not seeing that with Jon Tester right now. Part of it might be the fact that we don't have earmarks and we don't have the appropriations like we used to, where Conrad Burns could go in there and make it happen for Montana State University, or for road projects like Shiloh Road and other things like that. That may be part of it. I got it. But at the end of the day, over a decade in power, and Jon Tester's become everything that he campaigned against. He's got dark
but
money groups
do you
already on
think
the air
that,
backing him.
So you think Jon Tester is going to be easy to beat? If he's
I don't
everything
think
you say
any
is, you
races
think he's
are
going to
easy.
be easy to beat?
Yeah. I don't think any races are easy in Montana. If you take a race for
I'm
granted
asking
in
about Jon
Montana,
Tester. I'm not talking about any races. I'm talking about Jon Tester.
I would include Jon Tester's race in there as well. In fact, it was kind of funny. When all this news started happening, before we even had this special election in the first place, we had the big election in November. Republicans captured 4 out of the 5 land board seats. And then all of a sudden, Ryan Zinke tapped to be Secretary of the Interior by President Trump. Montanans resoundingly backed President Trump. And I remember talking with Greg Neff from KCAP Radio in Helen. He's like, whoa, what's going on? Now we got a Montanan who's going to be an Interior Secretary. I said, Greg, politics in Montana is like the weather in Montana. You don't like it? Wait 5 minutes.
But
And Tim, I think you could probably agree with that.
Back to the point,
It's
though.
a constantly changing environment.
You can't beat somebody if nobody. So who the heck is going to run against Jon Tester?
There's already some really great names. I know Tim hasn't had a chance. I want to give Tim a chance, and then I'll answer that question, because I don't want to talk over you, Tim.
No, you've been talking a lot, but there's no substance.
I'm happy to continue if you let me talk.
No, just
okay.
names,
Okay.
names.
Well, first off, in fact, I attended the Montana GOP convention over the weekend. Dr. Al Olszewski, a legislator out of Kalispell, not only is he a doctor who can bring some much-needed medical experience, especially for the healthcare debate, but he's also got a military background, something that I personally think is important. On top of that, you've got a very distinguished and good man, Judge Russ Fagg out of Billings, who's testing the waters, understandably as well. Another man, a political unknown, Troy Downing. Now, I know some in the media have described him as a self-storage company CEO. Actually, if you look back at this guy's bio, you know what he did? He was one of on the front end of Yahoo. So he's a distinguished businessman. But then you know what happened? 9/11. And what did Troy Downing do?
Veteran.
Troy Downing joined the Air Force. And I joined after 9/11 as well, and so I have great respect for that as well. I wouldn't be surprised if Matt Rosendale, if people are twisting his arm to get in the race too. So there's a number of strong candidates.
Yes.
And who else is still out there? Because I think people see the results of this special election, and Jon Tester is very vulnerable. But Tim, you wanted me to answer that question, so I hope I answered that. But I want to make sure you get some time as well.
Tim, would any of those candidates make you lose sleep if you were Jon Tester?
I think Jon Tester right now is focused on doing his job. And I'm sure that there's some consideration about what is going to happen in 2018 in politics. And, he's going to have an opponent. The real question is, will the Republican Party step up and support that opponent? In 2016, the Democratic Party stepped up and supported Governor Bullock, and to great effect. The Republican Party stepped up and supported Greg Gianforte in 2010 special election. The Democrats will likely support the incumbent Jon Tester with a lot of money. Is there going to be that Republican wave of money that comes in against Jon Tester for one of these Tier B candidates that he's talking about? And that's a question that remains untold.
And what will people look at to make that decision? What will people in Washington, D.C. look at when they're deciding, are we going to spend in Montana, or are we going to spend somewhere else in the country?
Well, I think the people that make these decisions don't sit around making up talking points. They actually look at data. And when they look at the data, they're going to see that Jon Tester has a pretty strong, solid base among moderate Republicans of both parties. And, that'll be the biggest factor. And I think it was a factor in why the Democrats didn't come in 2017 for Quist.
$3.1 million. That's the cash on hand that Jon Tester has at this point. Mm-hmm. That's almost twice what he had at the same time in the 2011 cycle. There's that. If you kind of look, again, it was a $50 million race when you had an excellent candidate, Congressman Denny Rehberg, a $50 million race. Matt Rosendale's interesting. If he runs, that could be intriguing. But Matt Rosendale isn't from Montana either, right? I mean, thinking about Matt Rosendale from Maryland, and he sounds like from Maryland, that doesn't look good against Jon Tester, the big belly farmer. Who else out there is possibly that could emerge against Jon Tester?
When you asked Tim about some names on the Democratic side, one of the names he threw out was Jesse Laszlovich. And Jesse Laszlovich, a great guy. A lot of the insiders know him and think he's a great guy. Now, he's already kind of lost a couple of times, and probably some of that because the Democrats probably stabbed him in the back a little bit too. But even Tim said Jesse Laszlovich is one of the Democrats' great candidates. Well, who beat him in the last election in a statewide race?
First of all, I didn't say that.
Didn't say what?
I named these people as potential people. I didn't say any of them.
So he's not a great candidate.
Jesse Lazovich is a great person.
He's not a great candidate.
He's not a candidate right now.
Okay.
He's lost a couple of races, but he's also a very good person and a hard-working person that serves Montanans and does it very, very well. And I think that's what people are looking for in all of these races. And I think this.
But you're saying he's not a great candidate. I guess
No,
I was
no,
a
I
little
didn't-
surprised
I
to hear a
didn't-
Democratic
no, no.
consultant
See-
saying that.
See, putting words into people's mouths doesn't work, okay? All these people are putting themselves forward to be public servants on the
Definitely.
Republican and the Democratic side, and they deserve better.
I agree. I think at the end of the day, I think one of the problems in Helena right now is that if a certain Republican or even a certain conservative is seen out in Helena having a beer or a cup of coffee with a certain Democrat, that Democrat's going to get some nasty grams a few hours later. And I think we need to go back to the Ronald Reagan, Tip O'Neill days where everybody could have a beer at the end of the day. I completely agree with you on that front, Tim.
I guess I want to switch away a little bit from Jon Tester and the races coming up and talk about kind of the general political landscape of Montana.
Yeah.
Of course, we have 2018, 2020 coming up. Democrats have 2 statewide offices that they hold now, the governor and U.S. Senate. Republicans would like to take those and make Montana just a completely red state. I'm just wondering, first of all, Tim, do you think Democrats can kind of regain their mojo in these coming elections? And how are they going to speak to the areas that they've been losing in, primarily rural Montana, Yellowstone County, even Cascade County? I mean, how are they going to do it?
Well, I do think that we're at a point where both parties are kind of struggling to figure out exactly where their hearts and minds are. Are Democrats going to continue to focus more on issues that are fringe, or are they going to start talking about jobs and economy and agriculture and farming and the things that really do affect people on a day-to-day basis? And are Republicans going to possibly do the same? In a world where it was politically palatable to say, I'm all in for Trump, I'm all in for Trump, vote for me. Is that message going to work for them long term? I think there's risk in that. It's worked so far. But I think both parties really have to do a gut check about 2018, and we'll see a bit of a sea change as some of these policies from the Trump administration start hitting people, where it hurts.
Mm-hmm.
Mike, I'd agree with Tim there again that about both parties need to do a soul searching or a gut check. And some of the rumors and the concerns I was hearing last week ahead of the Montana Republican Party convention was that the focus for the Republican Party over the next 2 years was going to be fighting other Republicans. Well, I can guarantee you, the Republicans just elected very strong new leadership, Deborah Lamb and Terry Nelson, and I can guarantee you, talking with them and talking with other folks at the convention, that the Montana GOP is solely united and focused behind taking the fight to Jon Tester and the Democrats in 2018.
But they're also
so I think they've done that gut check.
Gutting public school education, kicking people off their health care. There's a lot of issues that I think.
I believe the cuts to education that we saw last year were coming out of the governor's office, in addition to trying to fire a bunch of Montana Highway Patrol troopers. Maybe he should have been a little more supportive of our natural resource industry so we can keep that money coming in and keep funding education and Highway Patrol troopers and everything.
The record is repeating. But what you need to really focus on is that Governor Bullock, again, is a great person. And he and his wife do an excellent job representing our state. And they are fighting for infrastructure, they're fighting for jobs, they're working very hard for health care. They're taking it seriously and actually doing the work and not just talking. And I think
right now people aren't looking for nice people, they're looking for people who can deliver. And infrastructure hasn't been delivered. And
I didn't say they're nice.
And that's going to
they are nice
and that's
people,
going
but
to
they're
carry
also fantastic.
That's going to
public
carry
servants.
through to 2020. I just think it's time. People are ready for results. And that's why even blue-collar Democrats and union Democrats were voting for President Trump. And so far, he's delivering for them.
Why did the Montana Republicans in the legislature not pass a legislature bill? I'm sorry,
A
an
legislature bill?
Infrastructure
Well, they
bill.
did pass a lot of infrastructure funding, but you know as well as I do that the bar that it was going to take to pass bonding for infrastructure was way too high. So why didn't the governor show some leadership, take off the coat, roll up the sleeves, go down there, Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan, have a beer and make a deal?
We're going to have to settle on, there's a disagreement about the infrastructure.
There we go.
One thing I think we all agree upon is that 54% turnout in a midterm in a special election is fantastic. Good for us here in Montana. And please join us again on Face the State, where we'll talk more about the political scene here in the state.
You've been watching Face the State, a presentation of MTN, the Montana Television Network.